let's say we had to evaluate the following 3 problems. Now, you probably wouldn't think much of these problems and you would probably just go about evaluating them. But actually, these 3 problems are what we call expressions. And specifically, we would refer to these as numeric expressions. Now, what are numeric expressions? Basically, numeric expressions is where there are a minimum of 2 numbers that are joined by at least one operator. And as a refresher, there are 4 main operators, which is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. So if you look at our first expression, we have 2 plus 2. So as you see, we have our 2 numbers, which is 2 and 2, and they're both joined by a plus sign. If you look at the second expression, our 2 numbers are 5 and 8, and once again, they're joined by a plus sign. If we go down to the third expression, we have 3 numbers, which are 10, 5, and 7. And as you see, the 10 and 5 are joined by a division sign, and the 5 and 7 are joined by a minus sign. But remember, there only needs to be at least one operator, so that would also be considered an expression. Now let's say we wanted to spice things up. And this time, let's say we wanted to calculate 2 times any number plus 2. So to figure out what any number can be, we're trying to figure out all the possibilities. So we decide, okay, let's calculate what 2 times 2 plus 2 is, or 2 times 3 plus 2 is, or 2 times 4 plus 2 is. And as you see, you kind of get the gist. We're kind of going up the line of all the possible numbers that any number can be. And as you see, this can get a bit tedious trying to figure out what that number can be because there's a lot of numbers. So rather than do all of this, let's simplify this. Rather than trying to figure out what that number can be, let's have any number be a number called n. And to figure out what 2 times any number plus 2 is, we'll just say, hey, to figure that out, we'll use this. 2n plus 2 will give us that result. Now you're probably wondering, why the heck do we have letters in math? Now this letter n is what we call a variable. And a variable serves for this purpose, to calculate what any number can be. So if we want to sub in any number to be 100, then we can just plug in 100 to n. Or if we want to be -1, we would just plug it in. So rather than figuring out all the possibilities of what any number can be, we just use a variable instead. Now, as a whole, 2n plus 2 is also considered an expression, and we would refer to this as an algebraic expression. And essentially, an algebraic expression is when there's at least one variable that's joined by at least one operator and another variable or number. And in this case, as you see, we have at least one variable, which is n, that's joined by a plus sign, and in this case, another number, which is 2. So now we have gone through what expressions are, and we know that there is 2 types of expressions, which are numeric expressions and algebraic expressions. So let's solidify this by going through an example that's a word problem to try to figure out how we would create an expression out of a word problem. So we have the following word problem that says, Rose works at a car wash and earns $75 per day plus tips. How much does Rose make per day? Write an algebraic expression. Now remember, they're asking us to write an algebraic expression. So we know that with an algebraic expression, there has to be at least one variable and at least another variable or number. So in this case, some keywords that I noticed is that it says Rose makes $75 per day. So essentially, no matter what day it is, she's always going to make $75. But it also says she makes $75 per day plus tips. So maybe one day she's always going to make $75, but in terms of tips, what if she makes $0 in tips, which is horrible, but hey, it is what it is. Or maybe another day she's going to make $75 plus maybe $10 in tips. Or if she gets lucky, maybe she'll make $75 plus $200 in tips. But as you see, the value in tips is going to vary from day to day. And when this happens, this tells us that our tips is going to be our variable in this case, since it can change from day to day. So our algebraic expression in this case would be 75 plus t. And t serves as our variable for tips. And that would be the answer. So that pretty much wraps up today's lesson, and take care.